Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Concern podcast, where we unpack political, socio-economic, and cultural stories shaping our world. I'm Emmanuel, and on this section of our podcast, I want us to discuss about the political affairs happening in the Pearl of Africa, in Uganda. You know, Uganda is heading towards a general elections next year in January 2026, where the country will seek to elect its next president who will serve for the next 5 years, and also members of parliament in the National Assembly. That's about the election that's going to happen in next year in 2026. And very soon, we will see the country set in a campaign mode. We will very soon see that the political parties and politicians making their political tours across the country, try to convince the electorate on why they should be given a chance. Very soon we will see just the country being in a very, very, very serious campaign mode, and it's going to happen soon. But the most interesting thing about this forthcoming election is that the current sitting president of Uganda, His Excellency General Museveni, has actually confirmed that he is going to be in the ballot for the next election, of which, if he wins, it's going to extend his rule to over 40 years as a president. Remember, Museveni came in power in 1986. So if he win the next elections, then he's going to be one of the longest serving, one of the presidents who was served the longest in the continent. Very interesting. He has big nomination from his National Resistance Movement Party, and actually he has been confirmed as the flag bearer for the National Resistance Movement for the 2026 elections. Very interesting. On the other hand, the opposition leader or the president of the major opposition political party, the National Unity Platform, Robert Chagulanyi, also known as Bob Wine, has been elected as the president of the National Unity Platform again. This means that Robert Chagulanyi will be the flag bearer for the National Unity Platform, and he has as well confirmed that he is going to be on the ballot in the next year's election, which means that we're going to see a rematch between President Yoweri Museveni and Robert Chagulanyi, who was also there on the ballot in the previous election, in the 2021 elections. And yes, but here I just want us to look at the possibility of Uganda getting their next president being a new person who is not President Yoweri Museveni. Is it possible for Ugandans to vote for a new president, or is it possible for Uganda to get its next president a new person who is not President Museveni? Is that possible? I would say President Museveni, who is the current president of Uganda, is a hard nut to crack. Museveni is not just like an ordinary leader that you're going to face him in an election and expect to win as early as morning. No, he's not. This is a guy who has been in power for a very long time. He has consolidated himself in power. He has mastered the art of winning election. And people always say that Museveni is unpopular in the Ugandan society, which I disagree. Museveni is not unpopular. According to me, Museveni is still popular in Uganda, not just among the older people, but even among the youths. Museveni is still popular. And the reason why I feel Museveni is so popular is that Museveni is a very conservative leader whose idea seems to resonate so much with the people who the young people who are totally in disagreement of African leaders looking into the West so much. He is a conservative leader that does not really care so much about opinions of the West about himself. And that's why I think Museveni is so popular in the country. It's not that so much popular, but if I would rate, that would be about 45%. And that still gives him a possibility of winning an election. And some people argue that in the previous elections, Museveni rigged, of which I don't want to talk much about that. I have no factual information about that. But Museveni is just a hard nut to crack. But regarding the possibility of Uganda having a next president, not Museveni, I think that can only be possible if the opposition in Uganda is very organized. Uganda can only have a new president who is not Museveni when the opposition gets into the 2026 elections in a very organized way. Some people may have the fear that it's not even possible to unseat President Museveni because this is a guy who has been in power for very long. He is in control of almost all the institutions of government. He is in control of the National Police Service. He is in control of the army. He is in control of the Electoral Commission. He is in control of the judiciary. He is in control of the parliament. He holds all state machinery. So people argue that it is hard. But look, it's not hard to win against President Museveni if the opposition is organized. But how can the opposition organize itself in a bid to win against President Museveni? We have the opposition that is right now doing great, I would say. We have the National Unity Platform, which is doing great. Robert Chagulanyi, who is the president of the National Platform, is so popular in the country and mainly in the central, which actually contains the majority of the Ugandan population. The central is mainly where the National Unity Platform had its base. So that is the support base, the bedrock of the National Unity Platform is the central. We're talking about districts in Kampala, Wakiso, all these central districts. They actually have so many supporters of the National Unity Platform, which is very good. We also have other opposition political parties. We have the Alliance for National Transformation, the ANT, under Mugisa Muntu, who was actually a former army general under Museveni. He has also followings. And we do also have the FDC, the Forum for Democratic Change, which has been one of the longest opposition political party before the National Unity Platform actually was formed. But the FDC right now is not united. We all know that. In the last election, when engineer Patrick Oboy Omuriat became the president of the FDC and the flag bearer for FDC, in the aftermath there came disagreement within the FDC, and right now the FDC is actually split into two. We have the FDC mainstream, which is under Patrick Oboy Omuriat, and then the Secretary General, which is Nandala Mafabi, and we also have the PFF, which has recently been formed under the leadership of the Kampala City Lord Mayor Arias Lukwago and likes of Semu Uganda. So having a disunited opposition that is heading towards an election with the aim of winning Museveni, I think that is impossible. You can never win Museveni when you're going into an election as opposition when you're disunited. And people should not even think that with Bobi Wine being there and other political parties can easily give him a chance of winning that election. Never. Bobi Wine will never win this election. That's my opinion. Unless, the opposition can only win this 2026 election when they get consolidated. I'll give you a scenario. Let's look at Kenya. For instance, in Kenya, it is very, very, very hard for a political party to front a candidate and expect to go into an election with the aim of winning. Never. That does not happen. A single political party in Kenya can never front a candidate and they expect to get into an election with the aim of winning. No. What happens in Kenya is that every time when the country heads towards an election, the political parties form themselves into two major political coalitions. And we have seen that in the previous elections, where in Kenya, when they're heading to the 2022 elections, we had two major political coalitions, the Kenya Kwanza and the Azimio la Umoja political coalition, of which later on the Kenya Kwanza won the elections. And I feel that Uganda need to emulate the same. That if it is not, Museveni can, of course, he has support, but if the opposition want to win against him, what they need to do is that they have to be united and only front one candidate. That is the only way they can win Museveni. But if they go as a disunited opposition, they will never ever win the elections next year in 2026. Never. And there's always this trend that has been happening in Uganda for quite long, that every time the country heads towards an election, there's always a bill introduced in the National Assembly or in the Parliament that actually makes it so easy for Museveni to win an election or to be the next president. I'll give you a scenario. In 1995, Uganda attained its constitution, a complete constitution, very well. And in the 1995 constitution, Article 105 had actually restricted a president to only serve for 2 terms, which is a total of 10 years. But when Uganda was heading towards an election, I think in 2006, in 2005, they introduced a bill in the parliament, an amendment bill that would actually erase the term limit. And in 2005, the bill was introduced and Article 105 in the constitution was erased, which gave Museveni more time to actually become, again, to vie in the subsequent election, of which he had already served for 2 terms. So in the next elections after 2005, Museveni headed to an election to the elections and he won it, simply because the term limit was erased. Secondly, in 2017, as Uganda was heading towards the 2021 election, there was a bill introduced in the parliament, and that was the age limit amendment bill, where the parliament sought to actually erase the age limit bill, Article 102 of the Constitution, which will give Museveni the luxury to again become the next president in the subsequent election that was in 2021. So in 2021, when the age limit was erased in 2017, 2021 election, Museveni again was given a chance and he became the next president of the republic, extending his term. Interesting, and I feel that this has been a trend. So as the country heads towards an election in 2026, there's a bill that has recently been introduced, of which I suspect that the intention of that bill is going to give Museveni an easy way to become the next president. What bill is that? It is the bill that seeks to try civilians in military courts. You remember in the last year election, there was a very, very heated confrontation between the convoy of President Museveni and Robert Chagulanyi, which happened in northern Uganda, in West Nile, in Arua, where there were claims that arms were found in the vehicle or in the convoy of Robert Chagulanyi, and later on he was charged for possession of firearms, and he is a civilian. He was taken later on. He was charged actually in the military court, so which the charges were later on dropped, And I feel that the introduction of this bill as the country heads towards an election in 2026, where they seek to try civilians in military court, is mainly intended for the opposition, so that I feel that towards an election, when the country gets into a heated campaign mode, you would see lots of arrests happening. Lots of arrests are going to happen, and I feel that's really going to give Museveni a very, very good time, or it's going to give him like a leeway into the presidency. So Museveni will definitely, I would suspect that in the next election, he would still be declared the next president. But this could be his last term, I would say. This could be his last term. Because when we look back into history, leaders who has served for quite long, let's look at Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe has been in power for quite long. I think it reached an extent where he became incapable of leading, and therefore it actually fronted lots of opposition and protest. And later on, he was overthrown. He actually led until he was 92 years. So the possibility of Uganda having the next president as a new person, not Museveni, only depend on how organized the opposition is as they head toward the next election. Yes, the opposition political parties are doing great. The National Unity Platform is doing great. And one thing that I want to comment about the National Unity Platform is that their ability to pick people who are able to actually render their duties. For instance, when we look at the leader of opposition right now, Joel Senyonyi, who is in the parliament, Senyonyi is doing an amazing job. And I feel that Joel Senyonyi has actually set a benchmark for the next opposition leaders. For the first time, Ugandans are able to see that there is someone in the parliament called an opposition leader whose role is mainly to critique government businesses, whose role is to critique government policies. And Senyonyi has been doing this so efficiently and effectively. He has been giving the Speaker of National Assembly sleepless nights. He has been calling for accountability for actions taken by government. He is doing a very great job. He is doing a very great job. But I feel that alone is not enough to actually give them a win in the 2026 election. Because the majority of Ugandans still believe that it's better the devil you know than the angel you don't know. So many of them would still go and vote for Museveni and becomes the next president. So in a scenario where the opposition goes into the 2026 election as a divided opposition, for instance, we have three different candidates from opposition parties heading towards the election, and we have Museveni. We're going to have a scenario where the votes in the opposition are going to be divided, of course, but Museveni always have his base support, and he's going to get it. He's going to work out with that. So if the opposition front three different presidential candidates in the next election, never expect you're going to have a new president who is not Museveni. Museveni will still be the next president. He will. And yes, of course, in so many countries, if the sitting president has a very, very consolidated support base, like his bedrock support, if he knows that that is always there, what they do is that they always sponsor a candidate just to go and divide votes. Maybe if they know that the voting bloc, for instance, the young people are going to be one of the major voting blocks in the election, what they will do is they will sponsor one young person to go and be on the ballot as well, just to divide the votes so that he will get his consolidated votes, and then the rest can divide for the opposition, of which he will ultimately win. I think people suspected that in the last year election, there's this young guy who, I forgot his name, but there's this young presidential candidate in the 2021 election. People suspected that he was actually sponsored by the regime just to go and divide the votes. And I feel we will see another new person probably being sponsored by the government just to go and divide the votes. And Museveni, and that's politics. There's nothing bad about that. So you play it in that way. So yeah, the possibility of getting a new president in Uganda only depends on how organized the opposition is. If they go into the elections disorganized, obviously, Museveni will win the next election as early as next morning. So the opposition need to sit down, organize, come into one umbrella, get a united opposition alliance, and head towards this election as one political coalition with one candidate. That way, they can unseat President Museveni. And sometimes when you have like an organized coalition and you head into an election, it becomes so hard for people to rig you. There's an extent where you get so many votes to an extent that they become unriggable. And I feel if the opposition do that, where they can get so many votes through coming together, it might reach an extent where even the electoral commission, if at all they want to rig the election for one person, it becomes so hard because the number of voters, it's unriggable. It's so big that it's become impossible to rig. So that's the only way I feel that the opposition needs to do, and in that way they can actually unseat President Museveni. But going into an election in 2026 as a disorganized opposition with different political parties fronting candidates, that will just make Museveni's way so easy into the presidency for 2026, and we will have him as our next president, or Uganda's next president. Yeah. Thanks for watching. My name remains Emmanuel Taban, and if you feel this video is interesting, please leave a comment. Follow our handles on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And also do not hesitate to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And this remains the Concern Podcast. Thank you so much, and we see you in our next video. Thanks.